Hi, welcome to Brain Drop, or whatever I'm going to call this channel. The idea for today is just going to be a small presentation of what the plan is. I have too many ideas and I need to get them out there. I want to talk about the things that are going across my mind, anything that I can think of, anything strange, anything news related, it doesn't matter. Fun facts are galore. This is what I do, this is how I think. Today, I'm just going to do a small little thing as an example of the things that you can expect in the future. I want to talk about ADHD and my adventures with ADHD up until I got treated. Recently, I have had the awesome ability and, this chance, I do believe it's a chance, to be medicated for ADHD. Because I simply cannot operate without the medicine that I have. Ritalin has genuinely saved me from catastrophe. And before that, I had different ways of operating with ADHD. And I think it'd be an interesting little experience to share with you what that was like before I even understood what ADHD was. And then when I did understand what it is, what it was like in that in-between period of knowing I have it, knowing that's what is my problem, knowing that that's what I have, that's my condition, and then getting to the step at which, you finally get given the sufficient medication that you need to treat it. So before I had any idea what ADHD was, I was always seen as different. I was the weird kid. I was always, the kid that was like not necessarily on the side, but the kid that was very different compared to everyone else. I spent a lot of time thinking. I would always have my brain firing off ideas. When I was very young, what I used to do was I could watch the TV shows that I'd watched in the morning using the left side of my brain, and I would see it out of my right eye. And then I would follow what the teacher was saying with my right brain out of my left eye. I don't know exactly if that's how the brain exactly works, but that's how I interpreted it when I was younger. Well, the brain thing is something that I understand now more as an adult, but that's how I saw it when I was a kid. Right eye, cartoons, left eye, actual following what was going on. I did that for a very long time, even up till middle school approximately. In middle school, I became a lot more chaotic. I started, being very distracted by everything. I would immediately unclick from classes that I wasn't interested in. It wasn't mostly about the classes, it was mostly about the teachers. If the teachers were boring, I would unhook immediately. If the teacher said something that I didn't like, I would unhook immediately. So I'm French, but I speak perfect English because I was born to an English family. But that meant that when I had English classes, they were English classes for French pupils, and the French are notoriously bad at learning other languages. It is a real problem. And so I mostly would follow the classes if the teacher was nice to me. If the teacher was in any way not nice to me, didn't care about me, or was boring, I simply wouldn't care, and I would do whatever I felt like doing. And usually that was mostly, be quiet and do something else in a book, but sometimes it would lead to me just being a nuisance. I would talk to the person sat next to me. I would make jokes, I would cause disturbances, no matter how I could do them. That happened basically throughout the entirety of my middle school up to high school. And when I got to university in about 2016, 2017, that's when I figured out what ADHD was. I had been told about it, I had read about it on the internet, and I felt, that actually kind of does describe the behavior that I have. But, I'm seeing these people who are talking about ADHD and the fact that it is life crippling, and I didn't feel that at the time. That's something that came later. That was one of the reasons why I had to step out of my comfort zone and go and actively seek medical help. When I was still in middle school, another one of the ADHD behaviors that I had was to just lose it, just like not be able to understand what people were saying. They would talk to me and the information would go into my brain and I would immediately lose it. Even if that information, it didn't, well, yeah, that's the thing. The information didn't have to be important. It would just get lost. If it was important, it would just get lost. I would forget homework, I would forget exams, I would forget all of that and essentially wing it. Thankfully, I'm smart enough, clever enough, more like, that I figured out most of what was being asked in post. I would be able to follow for like 5 minutes at a time in class, and those 5 minutes were what crucially helped me get most of my exams done up until, well, my latest exams really, which happened not that long ago. The ability to just have like 5 minute spurts of concentration that would allow me to pick up on the major information that I needed genuinely are what help most people with ADHD get through life. But when it comes to being able to actually sit down and focus on something for an incredibly long amount of time, that is incredibly difficult. What I'm trying to get at is the fact that that inability to stay focused very long, for me, was just a quirk of personality until, you know, I found out thousands and millions of other people have the exact same inability to stay focused on one subject for more than, 10 minutes. Considering, a lot of people say, oh, I also don't focus for an entire class. No, you don't. But if you're an atypical brain, you can focus for at the very least 40 minutes, approximately, something like that. The math isn't exact, but yeah, 45 minutes. That typically is enough to be able to follow for most of a class. And then you would take a 15-minute break. After the break, you'd chat with your friends, allow the information to gather up in your brain, then you would go back to class and you'd be able to focus for another 40 minutes. 10 minutes, 10 minutes to sit down, understand kind of what's going on. You'd start to get a grasp of it and you'd be able to pull that concentration for about half an hour, 40 minutes. Half an hour seems to be usually what, in my experience, my friends at the very least seem to be able to focus. My neurotypical friends, of course. One of the other things that I noticed when I was a teenager, when I didn't know what ADHD was this kind of obsession with certain subjects. Now this is starting to lean more into autism, but ADHD and autism have an intrinsic link. I'm still working currently on getting diagnosed with autism. This might be autism, but it does come up with ADHD. The ability to just not stop thinking about a very specific subject. For me, when I was a teenager, that was a lot of animation. I also had a very, very big phase of being into puppeteering. I would learn a lot about the subject. I would go really into, really just weirdly in depth on these subjects. When I first had access to the internet as a teenager, one of the main things that I was looking up was, besides the obvious things that teenagers always look up on the internet, especially in the 2000s, was mostly things relating to these hyperfixations that I would develop. These thoughts would kind of then just stop. This isn't weird, but it did kind of make me think, oh, that's a hobby that I used to have, why don't I have it anymore? And then I would look it up and I'd be like, this is where I left off, and I would look into it and then just not pick it up again. This is something that apparently also very common in ADHD. When I figured out that as a young adult, I might have this thing called ADHD. I didn't really do anything with it. Again, at this point in time, I was mostly considering it a quirk of personality. there's something that just kind of didn't really click to me, saying, the correlation between ADHD being this crippling disorder that affects people in kind of hidden ways that are very difficult for people to pick up on, and just the fact that I have a bit of a weird life didn't correlate. These two notions didn't really correlate in my brain until like a couple of years ago. I did seek help for mental health issues when I was younger, but they were mostly because I was suicidal and having to deal with the dark thoughts at the same time as having to deal with the abundance of thoughts. When I was working with psychiatrists, usually they'd want to focus on me not trying to die first, because that's, mostly their job. A lot of the time as well, when you're having these constant patterns in your brain that are constantly reappearing, it can be difficult to dissociate that from depression, when in reality, a lot of it can be linked to ADHD. People with ADHD, we just can't stop thinking. There's always images and sounds and different ideas that are constantly developing in our brains. And if you mix that with depression, that just leads to you constantly overthinking incredibly evil thoughts in your mind. You're constantly thinking about death, how to kill yourself, how to get away with it, how to do it quietly, how to do it without bothering anyone. You keep inventing these patterns in your mind to try and satiate both the fact that you are depressed and you want to die, but also to satiate the brain's constant need for stimulation. At its core, ADHD is just the brain in constant demand for stimulation. And that's when Ritalin comes in and really helps people. So when I was a young adult, when I knew what ADHD was, that was kind of a lot of what the thought process was. It wasn't, I need help when it comes to ADHD. A lot of it was, I need help so that I can survive tomorrow. Sometimes it's even more, I need help so that I can survive the next 5 minutes. It is sad, but a lot of people who have very bad depression, a lot of the time, a lot of the comorbidities when it comes to ADHD and autism get kind of just swept under the rug. A lot of comorbidities do tend to, I don't know if comorbidities is the right word to use there actually. A lot of the other mental issues that people can have tend to get swept under the rug at this point because psychiatrists try to solve the immediate issues that are going on in your mind. They're trying to solve the fact that they don't want you to die. They want to see you again to make sure that you're still going. That's their job. That's why they chose this job, so that they can see people get better. The thing with ADHD is that you don't look bad, you just have a different way of seeing the world, and that's why a lot of ADHD goes undiagnosed. Finally, when it comes to ADHD specifically, in children, the best time to help them is as young as possible. If you notice any of the reoccurring symptoms of ADHD, you probably should try to get your kid some help. If you notice it in a niece, a nephew, a cousin, anyone who's younger than you that has the same symptoms as you, if you're diagnosed with ADHD, that's the time when you should point it out to the parents. Even in younger siblings, it is genetically related and you should point it out to the rest of your family. It's important as well between us to recognize the fact that if you have ADHD, we have a tendency to recognize other people with ADHD rather quickly. I'm not sure why, but that's just the way it is. Compared to neurotypical people, we do have this pattern of like being able to pick up on other people who have the same symptoms as us. And so you should point it out at a family member if their child or whatever does present these symptoms. This rambling mess is the kind of thing that you can expect to hear from me from here on out. It won't be as dark and as tragic, but rarely is mental health and PSAs fun and lighthearted. Hopefully next time I'm going to talk about something a bit more, well, not hopefully, I know what I'm going to talk about next time. But the idea is, I'm really bad at this. I should probably start writing scripts. But see, that's the other issue with ADHD, is the fact that I can't script things, because if I write it down, it will immediately lapse my brain, even if I force myself to go and read it afterwards. In the meantime, improvising in front of the camera is fun. I do enjoy talking, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me. You can expect a video next week, maybe? I want to try and do this at least twice a week, possibly on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We'll have to see. In the meantime, I hope you have a very nice day, and I hope you did enjoy listening to me do this. This was Cosmic from The Brain Drop. Have a nice night.